Orders, Commander.
How many times must I tell you? Mind the nerdish cap!
We are...
All right. Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome to Mind the Nerdish Gap. It's my son Dante. I'm Jay. And I guess I'll kick it off this week. So a little bit of different change of pace here. So let's talk about the Doctor Who specials.
Okay.
Yeah. So I finally watched all three and everything. I really love the first one. Let's say I really liked the first one because it just had all the nostalgia and everything, kind of got me back in the groove. Felt like a mixture of good, old and new. I actually did love the second one.
Yeah.
And I just the performances and everything. I love the mystery and everything, and how they kind of threw it at you at the beginning, and then it all connected at the end. So
Right.
I like how they earned everything. I'm undecided on the third one though. So I've seen some reviewers and things that have, kind of given me some things that are like, okay, I agree with that. I like that and everything, but I'm still kind of torn. So what are your thoughts on the third one, especially?
Well, I guess to start, because I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Like, I really liked the first one. Maybe not loved it, but really liked it. And then the second one I think was really, really good. And then the third one I'm kind of like undecided, like mixed on as well.
Right.
So like what specifically were the things that like threw you off about
So
it?
one, his speech about humanity, it was kind of like, felt like an agenda type thing, right? Kind of we're gonna slap everybody on the wrist for being human, and slap cancel culture. And,
yeah, like some of the direct referencing.
yeah, it's like, okay, that's a little bit over the top, and that seemed very undoctored to me, right? So I wasn't a big fan of that. And then, as much as I felt they tried their darndest to write themselves out of the obvious, we can't just kill off David Tennant again. I don't know if they quite hit it. I like the idea that this particular iteration of the Doctor, that's why that face came back, because he needed a break. But I still felt like somehow they had to come up with a logical reason for him to say, okay, that's enough. I've achieved what I wanted to achieve, and now it's time for me to move on. So this dual or bi-generation, whatever they called it,
right.
I don't know if I'm quite sold, so I'll have to see what they do from this point on. So one of the things, a big problem I have with it, and this will be basically time will tell, but if they don't do anything with David Tennant after this, and they just left him alive to just retire or whatever,
right, yeah,
not a fan of that.
Yeah.
Because that just seems like a cop-out. Like they were afraid
Right.
of killing him again and getting bad press.
Right. Well, and like, yeah, because that kind of goes into like one of the issues I kind of had with it is like I like the idea of the bi-generation thing. Like I like the concept of it, but I'm not sure if in execution it's like I don't know if they're gonna continue the story in a way to where like because I want it to make sense and I want it to reverberate throughout the rest of Doctor Who, right?
Exactly.
As opposed to being something that's like, this happens and then we just kind of forget about it and we just like completely move on from the fact that like there's now two doctors out there.
Around.
Like there's two immortal beings that like have all of the knowledge of the universe just
with
running
two
around.
TARDISes that are the most unique version of the time machine.
Exactly.
It's no longer unique, it's binary now.
Right. And like one of the things about that is like kind of like what you were saying is like it kind of makes sense to me that like oh, the purpose of this happening was so that uh, the 14th Doctor could like finally take a break.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that in hand kind of confuses me about that is like, okay, so then Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, like the 15th Doctor, doesn't he technically have, because like I mean they even already kind of explained it to us that like he still has all of the memories and
Mm-hmm.
everything of the previous
Doctor,
doctors,
right?
so it's like, doesn't he technically at that point deserve a break too? Like it's
So
just weird to
I
me
think
that,
they kind of explain that because you saw when he generated, he was already kind of healthier, and
right,
he's like,
yeah,
"I've got you. I'm here for you." So it's sort of like that, Doctor, heal thyself.
mm,
So I think he was there to heal him and to comfort him, to say you are not alone. That no matter what, and maybe that was kind of the point of the human speech. That was his frustration that there's not another one like him that could ever fully understand what he's going through.
mm,
So I think that's kind of where they were going with that. So now he does have someone like that. But I think it's going to be really important then, because and that kind of explains why it's going to be season one now when the his series starts.
mm,
But I think it's going to be really important that at some point, if they're smart, they get him stuck, painted into a corner, and he goes, "I know the one person in the universe that can help me,"
mm,
and I think that would be awesome,
yeah,
right? And then he phases in, and then Tennant's sitting there going, "I knew you were coming," right?
right,
Right?
yeah, yeah, and like, yeah, I think that it's a really cool idea. One of the things that is also a possible issue that I kind of foresee is like they introduce this factor of like I just bi-generated and
Mm-hmm.
like it's supposed to be a myth, but it just happened and I have it.
You're right.
And so like one of the things about that as well is like I I kind of hope that they're not doing a thing of like now every time the Doctor regenerates, he bi-generates
Yeah,
instead.
that I don't think that
I
would work
I
either. Yeah.
really hope that they don't go that direction because like then not only not only does it like really breathe air into the issue of like we have a bunch of these immortal doctors running around like just like at a certain point we'd have like tens of them and it would
Mm-hmm.
be like yeah, that's a little bit too much. um but the other kind of quality about that that I was thinking about last night was like I, in my personal opinion, I feel like I would have preferred to, like, to have Tenet, reach the point where, like, that specific doctor's face,
Right.
like, feels like they've accomplished or, like, done what they need to do or
Right.
like what wasn't completed when the face originally left, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that now he can just move on, like he can just regenerate without like having any kind of like problem with it or anything. um and like I feel like when with this bi-generation thing they've kind of like, at least with this specific moment, they kind of took out that quality of Doctor Who that I thought was like a really interesting and cool quality of the show prior, where it was like, as an audience member, you're not just saying goodbye to like this actor, but
Mm-hmm.
you're saying goodbye to like this variation of the Doctor,
Right.
right?
And you know
Like
it's gonna
you're
be different. Yeah.
right, and so like they kind of took out that like bittersweet quality,
Mm-hmm.
and like unfortunately because they took out that bittersweet quality, it kind of took me out of the moment of like being excited to see the new Doctor, right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like a kind of like a roller coaster of emotions that I feel like every viewer goes through when they watch Who, is like, sure, they feel sad and like really bittersweet or
Mm-hmm.
broken up about the fact that this doctor's leaving, but then as soon as the new doctor comes in you get that excitement
Of the
again,
new
and you
doctor.
get that like feeling of like, ooh yeah, I'm intrigued and I want to see where they go with this
Mm-hmm.
doctor. And I just didn't really get much of that feeling this time around.
Interesting.
um I feel like when they did the initial poll and you
Mm-hmm.
see them like standing there looking at each other like what is going on right now,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was like the most like kind of excited I got. But then it was like shortly after that I kind of started realizing like, wait, so like this doctor's still here,
Mm-hmm.
and like I like it just it made me ask more questions in that moment rather than
Mm.
just being in the moment,
Right,
right?
right, and celebrating.
um and like sure there's been regenerations that have happened before where like you start asking more questions, rather than being fully in awe or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example when Smith regenerates into Capaldi,
Mm-hmm. That was
it's
funny
like
that you said that. That's the one
instantaneous.
the
Yeah,
example that I had too. Yep.
yeah, where it's like it's instantaneous and it's like, whoa, what just
And
happened?
then he was all
Like,
messed up too, so he was
right,
like all out of whack.
exactly. And like I think that that was kind of that was almost kind of like a better way of like having something different happen in the
Mm-hmm.
regeneration, that like you still feel sad that Matt just left, but now like you're really intrigued into like what does this mean, and like
Mm-hmm.
who is this new doctor, and like um yeah, like I don't know, like I'm definitely conflicted about it as well. And like going into your like what you were saying about like how so many direct references to like our day and age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there was definitely a few different moments like that that just felt it felt I don't know if I'd call it like divisive, but
Well, kind of preachy is what I would
preachy,
call it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you had moments like the doctor's speech, like what
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about, but then you even had moments with like the toy maker
Mm-hmm.
where he's like, where and it kind of stretches my belief of this character, right? Where like they're talking about like, oh, like why don't just you and I like go into the stars and like
Mm-hmm.
we can play infinite games? And it's
You're right.
like, to a being such as the toy maker,
Mm-hmm.
that sounds like the perfect deal. Like
Right. Why wouldn't he take
that
that?
sounds like something that he wouldn't deny.
He
But
couldn't
then
deny.
he turns around and he's like, oh, but humanity, the way that you ghost and the way that you
Right.
like it
You
was
make
like
games out of stacking bricks. You know, it's like,
it was like
come
it was
on.
like, dude, like I believed Neil Patrick's performance and the
Until that
character
moment,
all the way up until that point,
until
because
he
it was
didn't
like,
take that. Yeah.
yeah, because it was like, dude, like this just doesn't make sense that like this being that like for all we know hasn't even really been like around humanity or like around Earth for very long, because from what we're shown, he's in the 1925 time period, and then he essentially skips time all the way to 2023. And so like I don't know, like they didn't really give a good idea of like how long the toy maker had even been
Been,
with humanity to
mm,
like have this new perspective of like, oh, but I love being here, right? um
I think they kind of justified that. I think what they were hinting at is that he'd just been sitting there by since time doesn't mean anything to him.
mm,
I think he set these things in motion and basically had been biding his time, watching humanity and enjoying everything that they did until the perfect time came, which of course when everybody was connected to his screen. So
right.
he clearly knew that this was an inevitable direction that humanity was going to go, and so he wanted to plant the seed and see if it really bloomed. So that was
Mm,
his game, to see if it bloomed. And once it bloomed, I could kind of understand that he couldn't resist to see the end result of what he had created. So I could
mm.
kind of see that. But the beauty would be is if he's with the doctor and traveling through time, he could always just jump ahead with the doctor. But reality was clearly time, since it didn't mean anything to him, he could have clearly just jumped ahead to see what the end result was and then jump back and say, okay, let's go. Right?
Right,
So
yeah.
yeah, so I think the enticement of having another immortal being to play games with throughout, I think would have been greater. I think they could have done more with him than simply having this one game go against him.
Well, and I think it would have kind of been like a cool, like it would have been a cool kind of like one of the best comparisons I can make is when in World of Warcraft Legion, um when they had Illidan return, and like his whole purpose by the end of that expansion to the game was to basically be locked in eternal battle with Sargeras, right? Like his purpose in coming back was to ultimately like be the one heroic being that like
mind spending eternity
that
in
wouldn't
this fight.
mind spending eternity in this fight.
Yep.
And it's like I feel like they honestly like I don't know, because like it's hard to say with what they're going to do with the future of what they really did there, but like I feel like that would have just been a like much more of a kind of proper send off to not only Tenet's doctor, but like if they're looking at it through the lens of like, you know, Tenet's doctor and like the preceding doctors are essentially like the war doctors, right? Like they're the doctors that went through many different conflicts to reach this point. I just feel like it would have been kind of like a full circle of the character of like, now I have to go fight in the eternal war, right? Like now I have to go fight the Toymaker for all eternity, because that's like what my role is in this. Like I've always been a warrior in truth.
I was always really the war doctor.
Exactly.
I just needed a war that went throughout time, that at any moment the Toymaker could pop up and say, here's the game,
right? Because like it's easier for me to believe that like Tenet's doctor and like, you know, the combined knowledge of all the past doctors, it's easier for me to believe that they would be more okay with and actually possibly want to go and have this like eternal conflict, because like even at the end they have the 14th Doctor mention like, you know, I fought in all of these wars and all of these battles over time, and I didn't really know why. And it was like in that moment, I wasn't convinced that the reason why the Doctor would be fighting all of these battles was because like he just wants a family and like just wants to like sit. Yeah, that he just wants to sit at a table and like have dinner with people. It's like I don't really believe that as much as like, you know, it was my purpose to have all of these battles so that I was experienced enough and high knowledge enough of a being to be able to face the Toymaker for all eternity, right? Like I feel like that just would have been like
much better, because that's what it is. Like they overplayed their hand, because instead of it, to your point, him just going, now I've beat the Toymaker one last time, the best of 3. Well, now I can retire. Where it would have been so much cooler if it was like the Toymaker goes, okay, well, I'll see you the next stop, and then he disappeared.
Right.
And then the Doctor's like, oh crap, now I got to figure out where he's going to show up next. What's the next game?
Right. And like they could have even had the same ending to the Toymaker that like they had. It's just that it would have happened like way later in the show, which I think would have been kind of cooler to see, where it's like after all of this time, we finally see what really happened with Tenet and the Toymaker. And at the end of it all, the 14th Doctor is able to say, I banish you for all eternity. Like I banish you to the nether realm or whatever, right?
Back to nothing or whatever.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it seems like they kind of missed the mark. And the problem is even the Toymaker hints at there's a bigger bad, but then also they had the whole tooth thing.
Yeah.
Right? So that he, you know, put the master in his tooth because he beat the master in a game, and now the master's in his tooth, but then the tooth is left behind. So it's like, was it you did all this work to set up the Toymaker, which could have been a phenomenal big bad, just so you could bring the master,
just so you can set up the master,
because it was right before he was going to die that he ran to the Toymaker, and Toymaker bet him a game and he lost. But now is he going to be not dead because he's been trapped in this tooth?
Right. Yeah.
And how did they get him out of the tooth? Because clearly they couldn't reverse. Even the Doctor didn't know how to reverse the Toymaker's magic. Because like when the soldiers got turned into balls, he goes, "I'm sorry, they're dead." It's like, ooh, that was brutal. That was like a horror film.
Yeah,
brutal,
that was
dark.
Yeah,
like, wow, I didn't think Disney would let it go that dark.
Right? when they first did that, I was like, "Yo, like, is Toymaker just about to like just fuck this whole place up?" Like, I was convinced that he was just about to turn everybody into like toys or something.
Yeah. Like, woo, it was dark enough when they went back in the past and found the one dude that was the life-size puppet, and it's like, ooh, that was scary, brutal.
Yeah.
Then the little wife doll comes out, and then the babies drop. I'm like, no, sorry, no. So I love her response though. She's like, "Nope." She's like, "If this is a trick, I'm going to kill you." So, but yeah, so I think they really, and I thought Neil Patrick. I mean, that's the thing. I don't think anybody else could have pulled off that character because he was so over the top, and it could have easily just been a big joke. But because he was so over the top, and it was Neil Patrick Harris playing him, it was creepy as heck.
Yeah, well,
So like
because
he's singing Spice Girls, and you're creeped out.
Well, because
you know?
he's just like just extremely unpredictable, even in the way that like he portrays himself. Because like with the Doctor, you at least have the foundation of like whenever he changes his face or like his attitude or accent or whatever, it's going to be a new Doctor. But in the case of the Toymaker, he was just doing it on the fly, just like randomly. Like he would randomly have a different appearance, he would randomly have a different accent, and it was just like really creepy in that like it was good at communicating that like, you know, the understanding of this being isn't really like, it's something that we would never really be able to grasp because he can just change himself.
Right. Our reality means nothing to him.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I thought was really, really intriguing about the character, and also kind of made it disappointing that like if this is the last time that we see this character, I'd be so disappointed, because it's like, especially with how he was ultimately defeated, because it's like he wasn't like killed or anything, right? Like he wasn't like destroyed in any way. He was just essentially locked away.
Right.
And
yeah,
so,
because they basically hinted that he's locked away in the box and they're going to surround it with salt.
Yeah, that was one thing about it that I thought was pretty funny, because it's like, and it's another thing that I hope carries on in the series, because it would be kind of annoying if they set that up and then it doesn't. But the whole reason for the salt thing was because in the previous special, Tennant had invoked that
the
superstition.
Played the game with the salt.
At the edge of the universe.
Right.
And so, like, I thought that was really cool that was, like, kind of like a continuation of that, of that beat.
That was the gateway, and he realized I did something wrong there.
Right.
I planted a seed, and again, it was the whole plant the seed thing, right? So I planted a seed, and I may have opened up something, and that's what it was. He opened up the door for the Toymaker to come through.
Right. Yeah, and so like I think that was really cool. It's just that like I hope that gets elaborated on a little bit more in the future,
because really like follow through. I see it. Sadly enough, I really don't know if they're going to follow through.
Yeah, and that's the thing that worries me about it, is just like I don't know how many of these things we saw in the specials, like even like the dumb thing of like, you know, gravity becoming Mavity just because of the mispronunciation. But then they kind of walked
away from that.
Yeah, like
even towards the end of the second special, that he was saying gravity again.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, I noticed that he had switched back to gravity. He goes, gravity, I mean Mavity. But he's still...
Yeah, and so like that's another one of those things where it's like, I hope that they don't do that, and then like... especially to the degree of like, I hope they don't do that and then just completely forget about it, where it's like, you know, 2 seasons into Doctor Who from now, they're just saying gravity again for some reason instead of Mavity, and it's like
anything that fixed it.
Yeah, and rather than like going back and like showing us that they fixed it and that now it's gravity again, it just switches back to gravity, right? Like I really hope that, like with some of the, even just the silly beads that they set up like that, it's like, you got to bear in mind that like you're putting this into the continuity now. Like it's
you've
not
introduced
like
in the continuity because you set it up.
Exactly. Like it's not something that like you can do and then just forget about and move on. It's like, this is something that you have set up. So I hope that it comes to fruition in some way. And yeah, like other than that, I mean, like, I feel like all of the performances were really good.
Yeah,
like,
I think so too. I think they really had the right cast and everything. And I really like the new Doctor's performance so far.
Yeah.
Although I was really surprised they went through the whole effort of showing that it had a handicap ramp, but they didn't have her become his new, you know, companion. I'm like, that seems like an ideal situation. It's like, boom, handicap ramp. Want to come along? I mean,
right. Yeah, it was kind of odd.
She goes, about time. It's like,
well, and the thing that was odd to me about that was like, I thought that they were I thought that at first what they were doing with that was kind of setting up Shuti to go off and like make a new companion and like have kind of like a different set of people he's working with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Tenet would have that set of people that we've seen throughout these specials.
Right.
And I thought that that's where they were going with it, but then they had Shuti take the TARDIS that had the ramp in it.
You're right.
And so it was like,
why would he take that? Yeah.
Wouldn't it make more sense
when
for
he left
Tenet?
her behind?
Yeah, wouldn't it make more sense to for Tenet to have the one that has the ramp because he's gonna have the companion with the wheelchair?
Exactly.
So it was like, okay.
But then neither actually ultimately. I mean, she stayed, and so she's a part of his new family. But yeah, it's like, why didn't he get the ramp? So I was like, what was the point of that then?
Yeah.
So it's actually going to annoy me if he does find another companion that needs a ramp when you had a perfect character right there that you've established.
Yeah. Like, and I liked that character too.
I really liked her a lot, so that'd have been perfect. And I think for sure, if he'd have said, "Want to join me on this new journey?" she would have absolutely jumped on it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I don't understand. So maybe they're gonna have him in episode 1 pop back and go, "Hey, I forgot something." She's like, "What? you?" So that's just kind of weird to me. So I guess ultimately the last question on that is: do you think it was all really just to set up the new master, or do you think it's setting up because they keep hinting at a bigger bad, but then they made sure to show you that the tooth was left behind after the story that the master's trapped in there?
Yeah. Well, and something that was interesting, I would have to like rewatch this part of the episode to remember it correctly, but like it sounded like when the toy maker was talking about beating the master and like there being some sort of like other threat out there that he felt the need to like protect against or whatever, that like it felt like those were two separate threats.
Exactly.
Right? Like it felt like he was talking about something that like, is worse than the master or worse than even him himself. But then he was also talking about like, oh yeah, like I beat the master and he's in my tooth now.
Oh, you know what? I didn't. Now that you bring that up and remind me of that, I wonder if that's where they're going. So here's my new theory: that because they've done this a little bit at least in the past before too, where the master and the doctor actually had to work together because there was a worse threat. Then of course the master always betrays him.
Right.
but they've had that because they had the whole drums thing, and the master actually was trying to help the doctor, but then he turned on him and everything. But I'm wondering if they're trying to set that up again. That there's something worse out there and the doctor needs the master. But then the flaw to that is you got two doctors now. Right. So why would he need the master? They could just use each other.
Yeah, they already have two Time Lords.
Right. So it's like two Time Lords that trust each other explicitly.
Yeah.
But there's no question about loyalty or anything. Whereas you throw the master in, it's like, I don't know if I can trust you.
Yeah, well, and that's one other interesting quality about the episode that like I feel like is one of the first times we've ever seen it, where like back in like the 50th anniversary special, for example, when you had 3 different doctors all interacting with each other,
right?
They like and even in other iterations where we've seen the doctor essentially interact with themselves, there's never been such a sense of like empathy and like compassion between the two doctors. Like there's never been a sense of like, I'm here for you. Right.
And that's what he definitely did. Yeah.
Like all of the other iterations that we've seen of that, the doctors are always at conflict with each other and they're always like pissed off at each other for like, like in the 50th anniversary, for example, like Tennant and Smith hated John Hurt's doctor because he was the doctor that was like, directly to blame for like how the Time War ran out and everything.
Yeah.
And then, you had Smith's doctor pissed off at like both of the other doctors because he's kind of in a mindset of let's just move on, let's just get on to the next thing. Like I want to forget about all of that stuff. And then Tennant's doctor is pissed at Smith's doctor because he's like, how could you forget all of this stuff? Like, how could you just move on like that?
From it, yeah.
And it was just really interesting to like, for the first time, see 2 doctors interact in a way that was like you felt that amount of like, just like trauma between them where it was like, man, like we've just been through the fucking ringer, and
Mhm.
like I'm here for you because I understand all of what you've been through.
Right.
And like that was really cool to see, because I feel like that's something that I don't know about classic Who, but I feel like that's something we just haven't seen in
Yeah, I don't
Doctor Who
think Classic
before.
Who ever went to that level. And the performances, that's to your point. The performances were amazing. You really felt that. You really felt
Right.
like he's really here for you. Who really cares for you?
Yeah.
And he's the only person, like I said, that can fully understand what you're going
Understand.
through.
Yeah.
Right? He's everything that you're going through, he knows, and then somehow he's gotten over it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so he's here to help you achieve the same, or at
Mm.
least start your journey on achieving the same.
Right.
Right? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go with that and everything. All right, so let's go to your questions. What do you have for me?
Okay. So my first question um was going back into Invincible season 2 spoilers, people.
Oh yeah, spoiler
I mean,
alert.
we already had spoilers for all the Doctor Who stuff,
Right,
but
right.
spoilers for
Oh
Invincible
yeah, we
season
didn't spoiler alert that.
2.
My bad.
Maybe put up like a banner or
I
something.
know exactly how to. Yeah, add a banner at the beginning.
um but yeah, so in regards to Invincible, I just wanted to get your opinion. So like we talked a bit about like the whole Alan thing and like a bit
Mhm.
of like what happened in episode 3 and everything, but I kind of wanted to get your opinions on like some of the episode 4 stuff. So first off, of the Viltrumites that we had been shown
Mhm.
so far, um who was, I guess when I say who was your favorite, I more mean it from from the perspective of like not who was your favorite like ideology,
Oh yeah.
like
Who you
ideology,
agree
right?
with?
But yeah,
Yeah.
like you don't agree with them, right? Because they're fucking villains. But like, who was your favorite like design or like,
Mm.
like character cadence or what have you?
So what was the female with the braid? I'm sorry.
Thula.
Thula. Yeah. So I think Thula was probably my favorite design wise and even personality wise. I thought she was pretty impressive and everything. I
Hmm.
think hopefully in the second part of season 2, they actually spend a little bit more time fleshing them out, because
Hmm.
reality, other than their design, they were interchangeable.
Right, yeah,
Right? They
like
really were, kind of cardboard cutouts of each other.
right,
None
because
of
of
them
their
really stood out
viewpoints.
beyond the design, but I think they have the opportunity to do more. Now, of
Mm.
course, when you get the Emperor, when he shows up and all that stuff, you're going to get some definite character, personality difference
Oh
and
yeah.
everything, and then depending on how many seasons it lasts, you'll get to see his whole, you know, hero arc, I guess you could say, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Um, but and then the weird thing too. Um, well, I guess that must be later. So in the comics, spoiler alert again, Battle Lion shows back up and is kind of a big part of the war that
Right.
happens later on and everything. And that there's a long ass battle with him.
Yeah, yeah. His battle is like, I hope that they do it justice with the series, because his
Right,
battle is like one of the craziest in the comic
right,
series.
because it
Like,
like goes for like a whole year or whatever. It's just like
yeah.
ridiculous how long that battle goes. But so and that, I mean, that ends up being part of a significant story arc because of that battle and things like that.
Hmm.
So, but I guess I don't know. Like I said, right now they're just too generic, and I think hopefully they take advantage to really develop them out. Because even in the comic, they developed out some of them, some for the worse,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
we know what's coming and everything potentially. But hopefully they take the time and flesh them out, even if they just flesh them out as just being more evil, but just not so one dimensional,
Mm.
right? I've like got ultimate power and I'm ultimately evil.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's like that's one of the reasons why. So it's a hard pick for me, because like I think design wise, I really like Thula, and like
Hmm.
I really like like her whole move set and everything. Like
Right,
she
and how
feels,
she uses her hair.
yeah, like she feels like she's straight out of Mortal Kombat. Like she
Right. Oh
feels
yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
Mortal
I
Kombat
agree.
character,
I
one hundred
agree.
percent.
Yep.
And like that was one thing about her that I just really liked. But I think the one that I enjoyed the most was actually Lucan.
Mm.
Everyone calls him Steve Harvey.
Oh no. Yeah, he does kind of. But and he had the best line. It's like, next time you kill somebody, make sure they're dead.
Well, and that was like one of the main reasons I picked him, because like because it that was what was kind of interesting to me about that sequence overall in general as well was like they swapped out two of the Viltrumites that
From the comic,
from
yeah.
the comics that we saw in that sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that sequence is just like etched into my memory when I first saw it in the comics because it was just so nuts. Like it was
Right.
so crazy to see how far like these beings are willing to go to like fulfill their purpose or fulfill their like orders, right?
Right.
And that was one of the things that I just loved about Lucan's character is that like he is so like just fucked in the head when it comes to this ideology that he is willing to scoop up his guts,
finish the battle, and then call and say, "I've completed my mission."
Exactly. Like he is willing to the very brink of death just follow orders.
Right.
And that was the thing about his character that like I just really enjoy because like it's like that's a character that like even though like it's kind of going into like what you were talking about with like you know the best villains are the ones that think that they're in the right in some way.
They're the hero of the story.
Exactly. That like that's like the literal personification of like this dude thinks that he is following the orders that are going to like save the universe essentially.
Right. And that's
he's
what they
willing,
really feel. The
exactly.
Viltrumites feel like they're saving the universe. They're bringing order and removing all chaos, you know, sort of like the First Order type thing, right? Or
right.
The Galactic Empire.
Yeah, and so like that's one of the reasons that I just really like that character because like you can take that sort of like perspective and have it turn into something that isn't through our eyes just like evil, right? Or just like purely conquering. Like I like the idea of like they can evolve that character to still have that same sort of really focused mindset of like this is what I need to do, this is what needs to be done, but put it through the lens of something that's much more like in our eyes like moral, right? Or like ethically correct for him to be
and
doing
from his
this
point of view it
instead
is
of
because
this.
I'm doing the greater good,
right? Yeah,
that the lesser of two evils.
Exactly. And that's the main thing I liked about that character. But yeah, just overall in general, I think one of the most like impressive qualities of that was just the voice acting of them.
Oh
like
yeah, they did an amazing job.
All three of those Viltrumites did such an amazing job with their voice acting to where like you just really believed like what we had been set up as like seeing the Viltrumites as, they just fully sold that with their voice
fully
acting.
manifested it.
And
yeah,
like,
they were really in.
And that was something that I just like, man, like it just gets you like while you're watching that sequence, it gets you more and more hype and like just wanting to hear them more and more and stuff like that.
That's cool.
And yeah, that was just something I really liked as a quality about that episode.
Very cool.
But one thing about that was kind of funny to me was you know, Clancy Brown showing up again in like so many different roles. Even within this show, he's voiced two different characters already that were like pretty like pivotal characters. And so it's like it's just kind of funny to me that like he shows back up. And when I first heard Krieg's voice, I didn't immediately recognize it as Clancy Brown. But then like while he's like probably like halfway through his monologue, I was like
telling him let them prepare or whatever.
I was like, that's Clancy Brown, right? Like that's the demon detective.
Right. That's hilarious. Yep.
But yeah. So that was the main thing I wanted to talk about with that. And up until we get the rest of the season released, I might have like a couple other questions that pop up here and there, but I just thought that was like kind of an interesting thing to talk about.
Very cool.
But then my second question was return of the teaser.
Yes, once again.
And I wanted to know if you're excited for the new Mad Max entry, so Mad Max Furiosa. I haven't seen like the new Mad Max, like Fury Road. I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen the sequels to the original Mad Max.
Interesting.
But I've seen the original Mad Max. And so I wanted to kind of get your opinion on like, do you think
Everything.
if it's worth a watch? Or
Yeah, so the original Mad Max, sadly enough, even though in its own right it's a work of art and everything, not a fan of it. I didn't really care for the original Mad Max. Especially if you look at it through a kind of an updated lens, they literally did the fridge his wife and kid to make him into Mad Max, right? And so that's just such a tired thing.
It's like the Max Payne stereotype.
Right.
Yeah.
So then he goes off on this quest to get revenge because they killed his wife and kid. So I felt that Road Warrior was a much better story, right? And it was really just kind of, he was a loner, a drifter, and he finally kind of found a cause, a reason for his existence. So I recommend seeing that. Beyond the Thunderdome was just kind of fun. It was kind of just more of a popcorn movie, but it did have some pretty awesome action sequences and some really, actually, even though, by today's standards, they might be considered a little bit more, one-dimensional or, not as fleshed out, but they still felt right for the world and for the time. But it's a high-quality popcorn movie, and especially Tina Turner, she just knocked it out of the park. She was really good in it, so I enjoyed that. Fury Road, however, it's amazing that the same writer-director that did essentially the first three movies came up with a way to update the popcorn movie. So he made, I think, probably the best modern popcorn movie with Fury Road. And one of the things that he pulled off that, it's one of the things that you and I have both enjoyed about like John Wick, is that our lead character doesn't talk. In fact, I can't remember, but my memory may be off, but I think he doesn't actually have a single word in the whole movie. So
not even a yeah.
Yeah. He must speak at some point, but it's extremely limited, even less than John Wick, right? And John Wick had some great lines, but yeah, Mad Max has as minimal lines as they could possibly have for a lead character. And the cool thing about it is because what they were doing is one of those scenarios where good writing can have you think that you're watching the protagonist, and you are, but it's not who you think it is. And Furiosa was actually the protagonist of the movie, but you didn't realize that because it's a Mad Max movie. So it's perfect that once you realize she was the protagonist the whole time, then they followed up with this prequel, which is now you get to see what her origin story is. And the trailer looks really impressive, and especially because you can tell at one point in the trailer she has both arms, because that's a big part of her story. And Fury Road is the fact that she has this mechanical arm. And so they actually use it's not just a generic thing; it's actually part of the story. But you don't know, about it, and you don't get a chance.
You don't know how it goes down.
He, gives her an interview. You have to just go with it, and it becomes a part of the story. So you could tell in the trailer at a point, earlier in the trailer, she has both arms. And then there's a point in the trailer, which it may be, the trailer editing and everything, but it seems like someone's telling her, now what are you going to do with that? Right? That it looks like Chris Hemsworth's character is telling her, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to make the best of that? Something along those lines. And I think, it does set up for something so you can understand. They did actually a pretty good job of setting up why she does most of the things she does. And that's why you realize towards the end that she's the actual protagonist of the story. But this seems like it's going to even give us more of that and more of what is inside of her, what 100% makes her tick. So it looks like it's going to be pretty impressive. I actually looking forward to it. Quite often prequels to a successful movie, they're very hit and miss.
Yeah.
I think it's challenging to do a prequel and have it actually work as well as the movie it's prequeling. But I think this time it looks like they've got it right. So I'm excited for it.
Cool. Yeah. I'll have to watch Fury Road and kind of get like caught up with that. But yeah, that one seems like it'd be a pretty good theater movie for sure.
Right. I think I recommend Fury Road. All right. Well, we should probably wrap it up. We actually had a pretty good one. I enjoyed it. Thank you again, Dante, for having the conversation with me. Thank you all again for listening to us. So again, I'm Jay. This is Dante, and you've been watching Mind the Nerdish Gap.
Peace out, people.
Bye-bye.
Cellular transmission now.
Orders, Commander.
How many times must I tell you? Mind the nerdish cap!